as Nick said, I'm very old and I've been working for decades in climate change and energy. I've worked for the UK government, for the European Commission. I went and worked for an engineering company that works in the thermal power sector because I wanted to know what the other side thought, if you like. And for the last few years I've been working with business groups. I used to work leading the corporate leaders group, and I'm currently working with an organisation called Environmental Defence Fund, which has been going in the US for over 50 years but has only been in Europe for about 8 years, and I've been with them for about 2. So I've looked at this from a lot of different perspectives. I've worked in the United States, I've been in Australia and all sorts of places looking at the same problem. And I'm imagining, as I was saying to Nick earlier, I think you're probably an extremely well-informed audience, but if I was sitting in the audience here, I sometimes like a bit of ammunition to give my friends or to bring out in an argument. And so the first thing I would do is talk about actually what is the evidence. And this is a chart from NASA. It's not some green group, it's NASA, showing the rate of change of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere since the mid-20th century. And you can see that after 1950, it's literally off the chart. And this is not a little blip that we regularly see, this is extraordinary. And similarly, this is the Met Office, the global mean temperature difference from 1850 up until 2025, and looking at a variety of different measures of this and estimates of this. And this again, I don't know if you can all see, but just shows what's happened since the Industrial Revolution started. And then this last one, also the Met Office, the barcode of the coolest years and the warmest years, and you all know because it was, sorry, John, it was recently announced that last year was the warmest year on record. So those are the reasons to be gloomy, and I think one of the things that we've all recognised is that climate change is not something in the future, that whilst we do need to worry about it for our children and grandchildren, it's something that we are now experiencing all over the world. 35 million people displaced from Pakistan last year. Floods the year before in Germany, which cost a couple of hundred lives, but also cost about 30 billion in damage it did. So these are things, and we hear every year about fires in California and fires in Australia and floods. So these are things that are becoming, the 500-year event is becoming almost an annual event. So those are the reasons to be gloomy, but there are reasons for optimism. And Angela, who from Greenpeace, is going to talk to you very specifically about the climate crisis and the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis. We were talking about what are the reasons to be optimistic. And there are a number of things that we can be optimistic about, and that's how human ingenuity can help us tackle some of these issues. And since I've been working in climate, I was saying in 2006, this country produced 2% of its energy from renewable sources. And today the average is around 37%, but actually on some days last year, wind energy alone produced almost 70% of the UK's energy. In 2010, we got 47% of our energy, electricity generation from coal. Today it's about 1.5%. We can make these changes really quickly. The cost of offshore wind, the cost of solar, the cost of battery storage, all of them have come down by around 80% since 2010. And that is far more than anybody had predicted. There's always an initial expensive cost when you introduce a technology, but the cost has dropped much more quickly than anybody expected. We have, along the way, come across some false friends and some missteps. We're trying to tackle a problem that we don't really know the size and shape of it. We know it's bad. Not everybody's convinced by it. And there have been some mistakes made along the way, through lack of information, through lack of the kind of, what are the unintended consequences? And there often have been unintended consequences. So we need to be careful about continuing to make those and to challenge assumptions. back in the noughties, there was a mandate to include 10% of biofuels. But at that stage, biofuels were more energy intensive than the fossil fuels they were replacing. That is no longer the case for most biofuels, but it is nevertheless something to be wary of. We were all encouraged 20 years ago that diesel was better for the climate, but it had the unintended consequence of dreadful air quality that damaged people's health, damaged their lungs. So there have been these unintended consequences along the way. Biomass is another one. There's an awful lot of wood chip being produced in Canada and the southern United States, shipped over to the UK to be burnt in Drax, which changed from being a coal-fired power station to being mostly a biomass burning power station. Biomass is not climate neutral. It gives off carbon dioxide when it's burnt, and it's quite can self-combust as well, which I think they discovered there. So there have been missteps along the way, and once you buy into those, then lobbies create that makes it very, very difficult to change. But the progress is good. 10 years ago, there was so much climate scepticism around, it was very hard to make progress, and you don't hear it anymore. You don't see Nigel Lawson popping up all the time anymore. There are things, nevertheless, to be wary of. There's a huge lobby at the moment that's saying hydrogen is the next best thing, and I don't know if anybody saw Glass Onion, but I haven't seen it myself yet, but apparently it's on a home powered entirely by hydrogen. And you hear UK government ministers quite often say that we'll all have hydrogen boilers. Well, that's not a very good idea. Hydrogen requires electricity to make it, so you've already got an efficiency loss. It's the smallest molecule that leaks far more than gas does, and we get a lot of methane leaks from the gas distribution network. And we don't yet have the instruments anywhere in the world that can measure the leakiness of hydrogen to tell how much it's leaking, and then it reacts in the atmosphere with other greenhouse gases. So it is an indirect greenhouse gas, even if it's green hydrogen. And we just don't, there will be a use for it, probably in industry, but it's certainly not something we should be thinking about for our homes or for our cars. So there are things that we can be optimistic about, there are things that we can do, and there are things that we should be cautious of as we go into tackling this enormous crisis. I don't know really what else you might want to hear from me, apart from the fact that I've got to leave in about 10 minutes, but I thought if you have questions, perhaps it would be best to respond to what you would like to know if I can.